Welcome to Culture Snap. I'm Keeva Stratton and I'm excited to have you join us for our very first episode. In this series, we'll dive into the ever-changing world of culture by talking with people who shape, challenge and inspire it. Our very first guest is Rana Hussain, a leader in women's sports and a champion for diversity in media. Rana co-hosts AFL Arena on SEN, has been a boundary rider for cricket, AFL and AFLW, founded the diversity consultancy Good Human, and sits on the board of Basketball Australia. If that's not enough, you might also recognise her from ABC Breakfast TV and several popular podcasts. Quick note, I forgot to hit record on the camera for this episode, so today's chat is audio only. But it's a great conversation about making sports more inclusive, the highs and lows of driving change, and the personal stories that fuel Rana's passion. Settle in and enjoy as we kick off Culture Snap with an eye-opening interview about sports, representation, and building a more welcoming world. Rana Hussain, welcome to Culture Snap.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here today because just knowing you, you are one of the most fascinating but also most genuine people I think I've ever encountered.
Oh.
And there's a lot of people in, I guess, the space that we might define as purpose or you know, trying to make the world a better place. And sadly, they often disappoint you. But you do the exact opposite for me. You are someone who, you know, I'm forever in awe of, and I'm just going, wow. But you did do something recently, Rana, that did spin my head out just a little bit.
Oh, no.
I don't know that I could do it personally, is what I would say. You became a blue bagger for a day.
Oh my God, you don't understand how much panic just went through me. I was like, there are so many things I do. Which one of the things is she going to call me out on? No, that's deserved. I have to say that was weird. I was really honoured, though, to be asked to match day host for Carlton Footy Club for their multicultural round. It was a weird gig all round, I have to say, but it did require me to wear Blues merch, and it felt so wrong. Like, I thought, oh, well, it's just a gig, you know, you do the job. But then putting it on and having to kind of be really up and about for another footy club was deeply uncomfortable. And I'm going to be doing it again for another club in a couple of weeks.
Oh, wow.
And it really tested my MC capacity of, you know, how much about the job am I? I got right up to the line, I think, but did it.
It took me right back because when I was about 15 or 16, I lost a bet with a friend who was an Essendon supporter, and I'm a Hawthorn supporter and you're a Melbourne D's supporter for people who are unfamiliar. And, you know, there is a history between Hawthorn and Essendon that is undeniable. And particularly when I was 15, this was a very, very, you know, rife kind of rivalry. So it was just to my great discomfort that I wore a Essendon beanie and scarf to a game for the day. And I think the worst thing was because I lived in Perth and so, you know, it would have been an Eagles home game with Eagles supporters. Like, I was being attacked for my non-beliefs, you know, like these are not my actual beliefs. I just can't tell you how uncomfortable that was for me. So I watched the footage and you wouldn't have known. You're the ultimate professional because you were dancing, you were on the sidelines, you were revving up the crowd. Yeah, I thought, wow, I just don't know that I have that capacity, but well done.
And in fact, I didn't think I would find it as hard as I actually did because I can be a bit fluid when it comes to footy teams. You know, I grew up barracking, well, my family goes for Essendon, so it was probably expected that I would too, and then I defected to Melbourne. But then I also worked at the Richmond Footy Club for a good 5 years and really supported them and got, you know, that culture and a love for that side and that club in particular is actually ingrained in me now. And when AFLW started, I was there when the Richmond Footy Club had their inaugural team. So I feel like I follow the Richmond women's team, but I go for the men's D's team. So I thought doing an MC gig for a day for another club would be super easy, but actually putting on their stuff was really challenging.
And I can appreciate that, right? When you know people that play, when you're involved in a club that's not your own,
Yeah.
you can have that kind of moment of you don't want to see them lose, I guess. I wouldn't say I could support them, but I don't want to see them lose. And you say you're doing it again in a few weeks. Are we allowed to know the club, or is that
Of course, yes.
tight-lipped?
No. Well, so it's another game in the AFL series of kind of multicultural celebration. So this will be for the Western Bulldogs, which feels slightly more aligned. I've done a bit of work with the doggies, and I feel a little bit more connected to their clubs. I would only ever say yes because I want to say yes to make sure that, culturally diverse fans feel represented. And if they're asking me to do that, how can I say no?
Absolutely. And of course, that is such a big part of your work. And you've driven that bus, I guess, through Cricket Australia and, the AFL. And I see that you're now on the board of Basketball Australia. I think what's lovely about these rounds, and I think perhaps what gets lost sometimes in the discussion, is the celebration that can be a part of it. I think there is a lot of cynicism around rounds and as a mechanism of promotion. What are your thoughts on rounds? Do you think that they are a good idea? Are they complicated? What are your feelings?
I mean, I probably embody all of those feelings and that tension because I do go between the cynicism and the desire for representation, whatever it looks like and however it comes. And I've worked on games that are purely about representation and also railed against them, in these organizations. And I guess for me, where I land is my hope and the ideal would be that a celebratory round and a representational round sits atop of an iceberg of work, that is really internal focus, that is really building a foundation of true equity and inclusion. And that the round is the celebration of that and the symbolic side of that, and a way for fans to engage with the real work of inclusion and equity and belonging. And so the frustration comes when you know that work isn't happening and it is just the symbolic gesture and nothing else. And I think fans in particular are very quick to notice that or learn that. But then, I went to the Dreamtime at the G game earlier this year and I saw mob flock to the MCG and fill the stands and the pride in which they did that. And there was just something about that, no matter how much I can get cynical about it, being there in that moment and seeing how they felt, seeing their culture represented on that stage in that moment is something like that is actually a big deal. And so we can't do without it. And so I think for me, I've come to the point now where you will take all efforts. And if this is the thing that opens the door to the deeper effort and chips away so that more and more happens, great. I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to stand in the way of that. But it's very challenging to do it well and do it right, in my opinion. And that takes time and effort and investment. And, you talked about at the top, and we started talking about authenticity, and I think that's the key. And when it's authentic and when it comes with deep learning and listening, that's when it does land and it feels right. So I always hope that's where it's coming from.
And I think that that's something that you're observing there with Dreamtime at the G, obviously with Michael Long, being a truly authentic leader and someone who, lives by the values that the round is just the celebration of, right? This is just the moment. I think that, two things you've said there are really important. I think people are smarter than what many in leadership positions believe, particularly, crowds and those that go to games. I think people know when something is genuine and when it comes from the right place. And I also think it's who is driving that change and how they show up day to day. The AFL as an organisation, I can see that they're trying to embrace a lot of the things that are really important and matter, but I think there's an issue with fundamentally how they show up and what their role is for people to trust that they are doing that with good intent. And that's why everything seems to be met with a lot of cynicism and criticism. And I think it's really sad because there's very few organisations that have willing supporters or people who are really desperate to engage with them. The AFL for me have all of these passionate people who will internally wrestle with their own values and push things aside just to be a part of their team and something that is such an irrational passion that we've kind of touched upon. I think it's, probably coming to the fore for me most at the moment with the AFLW. I know that you're involved with basketball, and I was thinking recently about what is it about the US and basketball, women's NBA, that is so successful? What are they doing that is so right? What are they doing that's different to AFLW? And the thing that struck me the most was the systems that sit underneath it. If you've played basketball for 20 years, which you can as a woman, there's women's teams, there have been for many, many decades. Of course, you're going to have a greater skill set than someone who's picked up a game, any game in the last kind of few years and doesn't have an opportunity of clubs or proper training or proper facilities. But the brand experience of AFLW, I mean, the times that I've gone, my heart has just lifted, and it's been such an amazing experience. And I'm happy to have my kids at those games. I'm happy to, showcase that kind of experience for others. So I don't know, where do you think the AFLW is just kind of losing its footing, I guess?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, when you talk about the WNBA, you ask some people and their take on the WNBA is that it isn't succeeding and that it actually isn't hitting its stride like it should. I mean, I don't agree, but I think people see the investment that goes into women's sport as, a loss of money, or they don't think about it in the context of men's sport having had that investment and culture and tradition and system built around it for centuries, or a century at least. And so it is where it is because of that. And so what the beginning of something looks like is going to look like a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of investment, and it's pushing ahead slowly. I think with the AFLW, this is the 10th season. And the first time we're kind of seeing the first couple of seasons where we're seeing girls who have been playing since they were little and a pathway that they can really step through. And so we're going to start seeing that generation who have had a footy in their hands from day one and a culture that supported them to do so. We will start to see, the criticism is always that the product isn't very good. A, by what metrics, but B, potentially in comparison to the men's, but there are definitive reasons for that will change over time as well. There's an element of like, just be a bit patient, but at the moment it's still a product worth investing in your time, money, energy. Like you said, I don't know anyone who turns up and actually engages with AFLW that doesn't fall in love with it. I often find it's the narrative around it that puts people off rather than when they actually do try and engage with it. You do find something to love about it, and the skills are great. They're getting better. But I do think the AFL, it's the system around it, as you say, that just hasn't set it up to thrive. And that's the issue. And so until we shift those roadblocks, and that, yes, that's money, but it's also a culture that sees it as the sideshow. And until that changes, and, not to get too kind of org development about it, but you see in other codes when they fold the women's game into the everyday core business of the organization, culturally, they stamp it as just as important, if not more important, because it's a growing arm of the business and everybody has a role to play in its success, then it succeeds. You see that with the Matildas, you see that in Australian cricket. And so that's what I keep waiting for with the AFL, but it just doesn't seem to happen.
I agree. Narrative is always controlled by the organisation. So that's the thing that can shift. And you can tell a story, 20 different ways, 100 different ways, right? And so there's a lot of possibility there for me is how they're telling this story.
Yeah, but if you care about this, you won't let that happen. You'll create a completely different narrative around it. You'll point to what you are doing and you'll support it, but it just doesn't seem to happen. But women's footy was there way before AFLW, and I think it will continue. It's just going to take more leadership and more passion.
Moving, I guess, a little bit away from AFL, you've got a business now called Good Human. And I was thinking about this name, and I'm sure you get people that ask you, but what do you think makes a good human, Rana?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. And there's so many things, and depending on the context, I suppose the answer is different. But the first thing I often point out, particularly when I'm working with leaders, as I often am, is that we didn't call it perfect human or excellent or elite. We talk about is good and reaching for good and reaching for our best, but we might land in good. And so to me, it often invokes the idea of trying and putting in the effort and doing your best. And wherever you land, but the pursuit of it. Someone who is in pursuit of their best self is what I think about when I think about a good human, when I think about leaders who inhabit that kind of leadership, that they know they're not always going to land there. They have grace for themselves and others. But the effort, you get up every day in the pursuit of doing what's right and doing the next right thing. And that to me is kind of where I hope the work that I do lands. And, there's so many other factors, people who are authentic and genuine and caring about others and lifting others up. But at the end of the day, when I distill it down, it's who's in the pursuit of being their best self. And I ask myself that question all the time because I'm not always, but when I want to kick myself into the next gear or remind myself, what am I meant to be doing here? It's okay. Just be in the pursuit of that. Just try. Get up and try.
Yeah. And I think, social media is probably an interesting place, right? Because people are looking for their personal development or their self-development on social media, and it's not necessarily a great source, I think is probably an understatement. But
yeah.
Where would you start if you were to talk to someone who perhaps had that moment of reckoning where they've gone, okay, I've done something, or I've been called out for something, or, I've had some reflection and, maybe I'm not showing up as a good human. Where would you start with that person? What would you suggest they look at?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I always thought when I started out in my career, I thought my life would be working with people like me in my community, in grassroots communities. And it's become the exact opposite, where I find myself working with people who are completely different to me, people who often have veered away from their best selves and are needing to evolve or wanting to evolve. And I start with a conversation around, do you want to be better? Do you want to do better? Because that's got to be the starting place, going to where they are, where they find themselves. Often, I'm brought into a workplace where there is a problem or something's happened. And if I'm working with that particular person, or even the workplace itself, where are you at right now? What does it actually look like? Let's just get the lay of the land first. So who are you right now? Are you happy with that? Are you comfortable with that? Does that need to change for you? Sometimes for some people, they don't think they need to change at all. And often that's when I might walk away because I think, or a workplace, a leader doesn't really want to invest in the work of change. And so I think, okay, my time's finite. If you don't think there's a problem here, then I don't need to spend my time convincing you. I might show you why there might be a problem, but you can take it or leave it, and then I'll walk away. But so I start with that, the intent. Who do you want to be? Are you comfortable with this? And often, usually if I'm sitting there talking to them, they're saying probably not, no, but I don't know how to go from here. And then what I often find myself doing, and the conversations I have, is understanding that we are human. So we might be in pursuit of the good, but actually we're very, very human, and we all are shaped by our histories, the cultures around us, our experiences. And so we've arrived at whatever place we're at for a reason. Let's understand that. Why are we here? How did we get here? Okay, now I understand why I'm here, why I think this way, why I said those words, why I treated that person that way. Okay, now how do I want to move forward from that place? What is the corrective behavior, or what do I need to shift in my worldview? What do I need to understand more? Who do I need to spend more time with because I've never considered their perspective? And so that's sort of how I move through this work, particularly at that kind of pointy end. And, it sounds easy. It's really, there's so many steps in that, and there's so much time and contemplation in that. You talked about social media. What really kills me is that when people do stuff up, often that's the point where they're willing to hear you out. You know, there might be an initial defensiveness, but if you come with that kindness and generosity of, hey, let me help you walk through this moment. And I'm not judging you for being here because we're all here for a reason. We've all come to wherever we're at for a reason. But you can shift this. Let's do that together. If you get them in that moment with coming to them with that kind of a heart, they often will walk with you and get up and say, actually, yeah, I really do want to be better. And what kills me about cancel culture, though I understand why it exists, is that we miss that moment. So, you know, as people who want the world to be better, who want all of us to be better, we miss the moment when people are actually really willing to listen and hear you in a really honest way.
You know, I've for whatever reason lately, I've been going back down the rabbit warren of my criminology readings and things like that. I'm sure, you know, that just tells you I need a life. But it's just been something I've been reflecting a lot on and thinking about the learnings of hate crime in particular. And it's a really fascinating area of criminology because, you know, we look at the legal end, I guess, of hate crime and, you know, there's a strong argument that crimes of hate need greater punishment because they, you know, have a ripple effect across society. And I fully do agree with that, that, you know, when crime targets a particular group for any particular reason, the whole group feels it, right? So it's not isolated to the criminal incident. But I think what's really interesting about hate crime and something that I've been kind of sitting with a lot lately is it's often not motivated by hatred. And hatred is something that, I mean, we call it hate crime and we perceive it as an act of hate. But, you know, a lot of the research around hate crime will tell you that it's actually a protectionist instinct and it's an act of love in a weird, really distorted and unfortunate way. You know, and that's hard. I mean, that's hard for me to sit with and reconcile because the acts are so heinous and the impact is so vast. But there's also a lot of people feeling threatened by change in society right now, and particularly what they perceive as power and norm and their place in the world is eroding. And so there is this kind of human behavior of protectionism, which is lashing out against those they wrongly perceive as a threat, you know. And this was something I was thinking about in terms of it's just so easy, isn't it, to label people as good and bad and evil, but it's actually really hard to hold those two ideas and feel them both at the same time.
It's really hard. And I was just thinking as you were talking, you know, this work isn't for everybody. And I think about, you know, psychologists, their job is so hard because this is the work that they do, you know, so much rewiring for people, sitting with, you know, whatever it is that that person's bringing to the table and then gently challenging and rewiring their thinking or, you know, the neuroscience or whatever it is. And similarly, you know, to less extremes, really kind of gently challenging cultural norms or biases in a workplace or in a leader's behaviors is what I do. And I know it's a muscle that I have for some reason that not everybody has. People say, you know, how do I deal with X problem? And sometimes I'm like, I don't think that's for you to deal with because you don't have to. Maybe bring someone else in who can. But, you know, there are some issues for me that I will find too challenging and it will take too much of a toll for me if I were to work on them or spend too much time doing it. You know, there's some areas of anti-racism work that for me, I just think if I spend too much time trying to explain what racism feels like, that's just damaging to me. And that's not useful or helpful. Someone else can do that work. Or we can employ different tools and strategies. There's a limit to that for me. And so, yeah, it's not easy to do, but if you can find if this work is of interest or even in people's lives, like we all have relatives who challenge us with problematic views. And it's like, that is the ultimate test of friends who you love, but also sometimes say really difficult things. And it's that holding of, I love you. I see your humanity. I see how you arrived here, but I really am not okay with some of the views you hold or the words you use. You know, that's such a beautiful opportunity if you can hold those two things. But oh my God, is it hard? Like it's at the core. It tests your very humanity, because it is so easy, like you say, to cancel someone or to shut them out of your life, especially these days. You can just so easily walk away. And while sometimes that's the right thing to do to protect yourself, when you can sit with that discomfort and stay in the arena with them, you might see the change.
Yeah. And I think that's, you've raised there obviously the personal impact and also this kind of wider issue of often it's the people who are subject to, the hatred or the discrimination that are being asked by our society to fix the problem on some level, right? To show up in ways that are empathetic and compassionate when in any other forum that would just seem so unreasonable. I often think, and, I wonder where you're at with this, Rana, why aren't these the skills that we're teaching in our primary schools? Like maths is good, right? Maths, everyone's got to be mathing, but there's AI. And I feel like, I quit maths in year 9 and I have somehow run a business and I'm okay. I think there's something fundamentally wrong with our education system if we're not teaching people how to have difficult conversations and how to express views safely. How can you, as you say, to that uncle, and my uncle's lovely, by the way, so I'm not saying all uncles.
Hashtag not all uncles.
Hashtag not all uncles. But, there is always that person you love and you genuinely love them, and then you're in your family or your friends. And it's really hard to have to be the one to, listen to it, absorb it, and you've got to choose. Do you respond? Do you... Yeah, it's tough, right? So I don't know. Where do you think it starts? Where should this start?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I know I was lucky enough to join you at South by Southwest a couple of years ago on an extraordinary panel that you put together. And part of that conversation was around, with the future being so tech driven and AI driven, and so much of the world being looked after for us now by technology, that actually the best of us, I think the best of us will be the best humans, and those of us who are the best at being human. And that's often the conversation I'm having now with workplaces, where it is about those skills that we probably took for granted before, but now more and more are like few and far between. We're unlearning so much of that because of technology. I saw something the other day about how Gen Z, and poor Gen Z, like it's not their fault, but Gen Z and probably Gen Alphas don't know how to even visually respond or listen or actively listen, because so much of their communication is through a phone, through a screen, and usually text and maybe voice notes. So face-to-face conversations, they're just, their body language isn't actually, what previous generations would consider norm. So in such real time, we're evolving so quickly, and actually workplaces are having to teach younger generations, okay, no, this is what it looks like when you have a conversation and you agree or you disagree. And more I'm finding I'm doing that training, but I would love for that to be what school looks like for our young people, that we actually are going to teach them how to be their best human selves.
Yes.
Because that's really going to be, that's the secret sauce. The most successful people will be the best humans. So, and if we don't, I said that once at a conference, and a man came up to me and said, I agree, and I would love to say that's true, but don't you think we see the reality is it's actually the worst humans that are taking over, or, the ones that will exploit others and be the loudest and most dominant will rise to the top. And he wasn't wrong. And as I said to him, well, that is why we need to actually hold the line on this work. And that's why this work is so crucial and becoming more crucial, because if we don't hold the line on being good humans, that is what will happen.
Absolutely. And I think it's really, like, sometimes I wonder, are we the boiling frog, like, are we just sitting here and the temperature's slowly rising, and we've got this fun little social media tool and TikTok, and we're doing dances and we're just kind of boiling away, and we haven't quite figured that out yet.
Yeah.
And that's scary. I mean, I'm an optimist, so I struggle with going down a pessimistic kind of route too often. As I mentioned, I've been going diving back into crime. And, I was reading Michel Foucault's Crime and Punishment. I seriously do need to get a life. It's been a while.
Oh my God, you're taking me back.
And I had
love it.
forgotten. And I don't know if I'd forgotten or if I'd suppressed the first chapter from my memory, because the first chapter is a torturous execution. It's based allegedly on a person's account of an execution that took place. And the degree of torture in it is so visceral, and the human suffering and the hours of human suffering and the public nature of it is just so it's very hard to read. I think any human with a stomach would find that very difficult. And I think today, the torture's different, right? It's gone. It's more subversive now, and it's prettied itself up. It's like if we saw that level of torture today, as we do, and I'm not saying it's not existing in certain parts of the world, it very much is right now, and that's another horrific thing to consider. When we think about the way that we're no longer faced with horror in the same really visceral, confronting way. It's, to me, there's something about the hidden nature of the torture that the world is experiencing right now that's kind of bothering me, because...
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a big one.
No. That really hit me, because you're right. There is torture happening around the world that is actually being fed to us direct through our social media feeds. But even that, because of that, and because particularly in Australia, we're on the other side of the world, often they can feel like there's a distance there, or because it's coming through our social media feed, you could switch off from it. So there's that element of the dehumanized torture of others that we just live alongside. And I sometimes look around and think, what are we all doing? And I'll ask myself, this morning I opened my Instagram and saw yet another horrific video of children in Gaza, and I then just switched on to something else, and I just thought, oh my God, what is this humanity? But putting that to one side, which is very real, the invisible torture or the invisible kind of dehumanizing of the poor, particularly, in the systems that we live in, the cultures that we live in here in Australia, where the rich get richer and, those without struggle harder, but we see it less and we focus on, all the other things that we focus on. I think that is very real. And when you said that to me, it just hit the pit of my stomach, because we've systematized that now, it's baked in to how we live our lives now. And it is very hard to connect with those who are being segregated and disappearing from our consciousness. But you only have to then walk through the CBD to see how many people are sleeping rough, what cost of living looks like for people now. But it's so easy to look away and to not engage with that. And I think, we walk past that standard all the time. But do we think about that when we go to the ballot box? Do we think about that what we demand from our journalists who ask questions on our behalf? Do we engage in society and civil society in those ways? I know I'm getting really preachy, but I feel like it's worrying. I think we can easily, I'm an optimist too, and so I can often say, well, we're so much better off than we used to be. But sometimes we have to turn the torch into these corners and really examine ourselves. I did a panel at the Sorrento Writers Festival earlier this year, and the conversation was on civilized conversation and what does that actually mean? And, the idea that there is any kind of collective conversation anymore in the first place really stumped me, because there just isn't. And we do think of ourselves as a multicultural, inclusive society, but then when you think about it, we are so segregated. We don't have across the aisle conversations really. News isn't what it used to be, where maybe we would have. And so I think that's, torture might not be the right word, but that is also a form of harm, I think, that we perpetrate to each other on a kind of social level. I haven't been able to shake that thought of, oh yeah, we don't we don't engage with remote communities. We don't hear from anyone who isn't like us. We don't culturally cross over at all. And, to circle back to that conversation we had from a sport point of view and the rounds, to me, that's one of those moments where we might penetrate that bubble and we might find a little bit of crossover. And I think maybe that's more and more what I'd like to see, particularly from my own work. How do you just cross-pollinate and get that kind of mixing of conversation and ideas so that people's bubbles are a little bit burst?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Like these are the things that keep me up at night. And, I think the gap between rich and poor has never been greater, but also those that are probably doing okay probably don't feel as wealthy or as rich as they actually are because of this culture of comparison and, the way that social media makes you feel like you're always behind everyone else and, everyone's highlights reel and, European summers or whatever else.
Oh my gosh.
I just think there's so much complexity. But Rana, I think for me, it just gives me a lot of hope knowing there's people like you in the world thinking about this stuff and opening conversations. And, I watch your social media and I've said this to you before, I can't love some of the things you put up because I just can't physically hit a love heart to some of the things that you're sharing. But I think it's so important that you are sharing that content. And I would love Instagram to add an extra button. Like, I don't know what the button would be, but something that doesn't say, I love this, but says, look at this, or consider this, or think about this, and to your point about social media, yes, we can switch it off, but I also think there's a growing belief that everything is fake news, that it's very easy to dismiss things now because there is so much artifice and, deep fakery. And so it's very easy for the brain now to look at social media and go, well, that's not actually real. That's not capturing the truth. That's not, that's edited. And of course there is a lot of content that is, but, there's a lot of stuff that we want to penetrate and get out into the world and have discussions about.
Totally.
So I don't want us to end somewhere sad because, but this is kind of, these are the things. I mean, I almost want to go back to the fluffy Western Bulldogs scarf that you're going to be wearing and the dance that you'll be doing on the sidelines.
I mean, it's so funny that you say that. Like, I'm just thinking of whoever is going to listen to this. Like, I hope you have a cup of tea after that. Just do some, deep breathing. I feel like this is what my life looks like. It's sitting in this space, contemplating, grappling with some really difficult stuff, and then going to the footy and then watching and just like that and, texting my friends about it because it's so bad and I need something to giggle at. Like, I saw a post on social media the other day about what activists, not that I'm an activist, but what activists also did while they were doing their activism. Like James Baldwin loved to dance and Rosa Parks was really into her yoga, and I had no idea that she was into yoga. But what is the light if you're gonna veer into the shade, as I think we do need to, what is the light that you can bring to your own life and to others? And that's one thing I really hope with Good Human. I mean, it's very bright colors branding wise for starters, but I always try and infuse everything we do with some kind of lightness or feeling that people are comfortable or safe or it's not all bad because that's how I can't live without that. I need the light and shade. So for me, that's usually sport, even though sport can get grim as well.
My word is always chiaroscuro. That kind of speaks to my Italian heritage, but chiaroscuro is the light and the dark, the shade and the light. And I think that we have to exist in both. And I think that ironically, or perhaps, I don't know if it's ironically, but, when people are very kind of heavy in what they want to talk about and bring that kind of depth to that discussion, I think having light and having humor, those are the most powerful things. And, I hope that comedians never stop. I think there's a real fear at the moment that comedians don't know their place. I actually think comedy is really simple. You punch up, you don't punch down. Like if every comedian just adhered to that rule. Like, I don't think there's this big, everyone needs to be cancelled and everyone should be fearful to be a comedian. I just think just punch up. Like, it's so simple,
Agree.
right? It's
Well, if you want to see the lighter side of what I do, I'm about to start a AFLW radio show on SEN, which is
amazing.
exciting, and it means I get to talk footy, talk women's footy, and just luxuriate in that side of what I love and what I do. And for me, honestly, and I give this advice to other people who kind of ask me for career advice and want to do very similar work, whether it's in advocacy or activism. And I say, we'll have other projects that make your heart sing that aren't the thing that you're passionate about necessarily, or it's the other thing that you're passionate about. And I feel like you're the queen of this, of having, multifaceted career where you serve all the different parts of yourself. I'm so bad at any kind of activism or advocacy or work when I only am focused on that one thing. And so you'll be able to hear me not knowing what I'm talking about footy-wise, but enjoying the hell out of myself.
Well, I will definitely be tuning into SEN. That's something I didn't think I was going to be saying today, but that will be absolutely. And I love that SEN is going there. I think that's fantastic, right? Because women love listening to great commentary. I was thinking a lot about Roy and HG back in their heyday as the alternative commentary to, watching AFL. You could have a bit of a laugh and all of that. I think that we just have to press the mute button sometimes on the AFL commentary and listen to the great commentary, which you're going to be doing, Rana. It's going to be amazing. I'm thrilled. Anything that can make me love my game without that wrestle is something, that's all I ask of. If I was to write the letter.
I hope you write that letter.
I think I will. I've been sitting up writing strategy in my mind for the AFL lately. I've had a bit of time to think about things and, you get disheartened, but I do think I need to just say, dear AFL, we love you. You're going to be okay. But you just need to grow a little, you need to evolve.
Totally. Oh my God, please get in there. Please get in there.
I will try my best. Rana, it has been such an amazing opportunity to have you on Culture Snap. You are, to me, the epitome of what this is about for me. Intelligent, yet, entertaining and warm and optimistic and all of the things that I hope we can just build more of in the world. And I just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and right back at you. And I'd love to come back and be silly.
And that was the incredible Rana Hussain. If you do want to learn more about her work, check out goodhuman.au, or you can find her on Tuesday nights on SEN, or of course you can find her on Instagram. Thank you for listening to Culture Snap. I look forward to having you back for another episode where we look at who's shaping, changing and inspiring culture. Until then, take care.